At the beginning of the film, we encounter a scene where a criminal group is on their way to collect white goods for a transaction with this fat client. After traveling quite far, the fat client asks to rest for a while. But the drug dealers don't know that this client is actually a police informant. The fat guy had sent his location to the police, and they had instructed our main character, Lazai, to target and aim at the suspects. He had identified the position of the allied informant and was ready to act. But right after that, the criminal mastermind receives a call. He realizes this isn't a real customer, so he punches the informant and pulls out his gun to deal with him on the spot. The police team immediately takes action, not understanding how their informant was exposed, while Lazai quickly shoots the mastermind to save the informant. He fires several more shots to take care of the henchman. One tries to hide behind a tree, but he shoots through it and kills him. With only the mastermind remaining, he takes the police informant hostage and threatens them. They then escape, and the police's signal suddenly disappears. Lazai later arrives at the last location where the informant's signal was detected, and his team leader, Captain Wang, along with the entire team, also arrives. They notice that the informant had left a fan pointing in the direction where the criminals might have fled. Captain Wang asks the forest guard if there's a possibility the criminals could be hiding under the water pond, but the likelihood is very low, as almost every year dead bodies are retrieved from there. Local people and animals avoid this area, with locals calling it the man-eating pond. Although they don't really believe in these superstitions, while they don't fully trust the forest guard's words, they ask for his understanding as they need to approach the pond for their work. They won't force him to follow, so he can leave. Knowing he can't persuade them further, the old man leaves. After marching for a while, Lazai suddenly sees a strange image in his mind. When his teammates ask if he's okay, he thinks something just got in his eye. They later find a passage behind a waterfall, and Captain Wang asks them to carry only the lightest equipment to proceed. Going quite deep inside, they discover a dried corpse by the path. Upon examination, the corpse's hands are positioned as if in prayer, but they can't find any other path. Suddenly, Lazai removes his glasses and is surprised when the cave suddenly lights up and many face-like shapes appear. His eyes glow, and the ground begins to crack. A demon-faced statue appears right in front of Lazai. He approaches to touch it while everyone around still doesn't understand what's happening. As soon as he puts his hand into the statue's eye, he unexpectedly causes the entire cave to shake, but then a door opens. Inside is the criminal's warehouse, but when they check, they're all surprised to find the boxes completely empty. Suddenly, the informant runs out and tells them to flee because there's a monster inside. The mastermind also runs out, throws away his weapon, and begs them to arrest him, as long as they get him out of there. Before they can understand what's happening, the door suddenly closes. The fat guy blames the mastermind for choosing this cursed place to hide the goods. Captain Wang asks him if there's another way out, but he believes they'll all die here because there's a fierce monster inside. Captain Wang decides to go in to check the situation, but the fat guy says he won't go back in there again. However, since he knows the situation inside better than anyone else, Captain Wang needs him to come along. Besides, this is their job, so the fat guy shouldn't forget what his position is. Lazai gives him a gun for self-defense. They then proceed inside and reach the second exit. The mastermind opens the door for them and demands they try their best to get him out alive. Captain Wang asks them to stay alert. While moving inside, Lazai asks the fat guy why he wasn't afraid when he had a gun pointed at his head in the forest, but is scared now, to which he replies that you can't negotiate with monsters, but you can with people. 2 soldiers in the group are then caught and killed by the monster that rushes toward them. The team unleashes all their firepower at the monster, but when it shows no reaction, Lazai and a teammate move forward to check the situation. They find the soldiers' bodies but no monster. It suddenly appears and swiftly moves across the cave's stone pillars. Lazai is attacked but manages to throw both the monster and his gun away. His teammate, instead of running, stands hopelessly shooting until the monster catches and devours him. Lazai quickly retrieves his gun and fires at the monster, but it's unharmed. He then aims for its head, continuously firing at one spot until he finally creates a hole, causing the monster to dissolve into small black beads. Just when everyone thinks it's over, these beads unexpectedly roll in one direction, and suddenly dozens to hundreds more monsters appear and advance toward the team. They block the cave entrance, forcing the team to retreat while maintaining distance from the monster horde. They run onto a wooden bridge, and Lazai, being last, cleverly shoots one side of the bridge to collapse it and cut off the monsters. However, the creatures climb the walls to pursue them. One crawls under the bridge and grabs the fat guy's leg, but Lazai manages to hold him and shoot the monster down. When monsters nearly catch Lazai, Captain Wang provides covering fire from below. Lazai decides to shoot down the entire bridge and throws the fat guy to grab onto the bridge rope to slide down. Both slide down, and just before hitting the rocks, Lazai catches and helps the fat guy descend safely. But now the group is cornered by the monsters. Suddenly, a tower in the distance lights up, and from a door, the forest guard appears. He says he had warned them, but they wouldn't listen. The mastermind recognizes him as the one who suggested hiding the goods here and who revealed that the fat guy was an informant. He had originally planned to lead the drug dealers here for the monsters to kill them, considering it a way to eliminate harm to the people, yet Captain Wang's team still stubbornly entered. When Captain Wang asks who he is, the old man says he doesn't remember anymore. He then blows out smoke, causing multiple smoke columns to rise around them. He transforms into his true form as a sorcerer, saying no one who has seen his true form has survived. He commands the monsters to attack, but surprisingly, Lazai slashes and defeats a monster in one strike. Lazai's eyes glow again, and he holds a strange knife. Without hesitation, he charges forward to eliminate monsters and protect the group. The monsters begin to fear him and retreat. The sorcerer is shocked that Lazai is connected to Wu Mayan. When Lazai says he doesn't know who Wu Mayan is, the sorcerer explains that person is the owner of the knife Lazai is holding, but it doesn't matter as no one will leave alive. The sorcerer summons 2 water columns to drown them, but suddenly his magic is instantly broken by a barrier. A man then flies down from the cave ceiling. The sorcerer is shocked to see it's Wu Mayan, who notes the old man's boldness in daring to speak his real name. After landing, Wu Mayan gives him 2 choices, suicide or execution. The sorcerer claims he's been practicing cultivation and summons stone pillars. The mastermind falls from height and dies, while the fat guy and Captain Wang are being lifted up. Wu Mayan waves his hand, making the stones vanish. He approaches, dodges the sorcerer's attack in one step, knocks away his staff, and points a gun at his head. The sorcerer begs for mercy, admitting his past mistake of stealing Wu Mayan's elixir. But Wu Mayan holds grudges, so the sorcerer offers another condition. He had shared half of Wu Mayan's elixir with someone else, and if he dies, Wu Mayan won't know who it is. Wu Mayan gives him one chance to reveal his accomplice. The sorcerer reveals it was his nephew. Wu Mayan then tells Lazai to take his gun and kill the sorcerer. The sorcerer accuses Wu Mayan of breaking his word, but Wu Mayan clarifies he only said he wouldn't kill him, not that he wouldn't let someone else do it. He immediately rushed to grab Lazai's knife and slashed Captain Wang's leg, then used him to threaten Wu Mayan. However, Wu Mayan asked if he remembered whose knife he was holding. He was then thrown off, and the gun was handed to Lazai to finish the job. While Lazai hesitated, the man tried to fight back, forcing him to shoot. Wu Mayan then approached and used the knife to destroy the tower that the sorcerer had built. After the tower collapsed, surprisingly, Wu Mayan held a golden skull in his hand. The evil energy from the sorcerer suddenly flew into Lazai's body, causing him to lose consciousness. He hazily saw a plane coming to pick them up, and later saw the fat guy carrying him out of the cave. In his dream, Lazai saw something about him being sealed in the past. When he woke up, he found himself in a hospital bed. Seeing a knife nearby, he grabbed it. While walking around, he discovered someone nearby and approached with the knife. But it was just the fat guy looking for something. He wanted Lazai to calm down and revealed that he had been unconscious for 3 days. When Lazai tried to open the door, the fat guy mentioned he had been trying to open it for 3 days without success. Suddenly, someone opened the door, so both of them hid, and Lazai attacked the person entering. However, this girl managed to take his knife and counterattacked. When Lazai grabbed a curtain to block her vision, she cut it in half, commenting that for a Special Forces soldier like Lazai, he couldn't even hold a knife properly. A man approached and asked the girl, named Bai Lu, not to be so agitated and to return the sword. This man was Wen Ming. Wen Ming explained they were being held for health checks. Since there were no issues, the fat guy wanted to leave, but Bai Lu stated that the Min Dao Bureau wasn't a place they could come and go as they pleased. Wen Ming asked them to follow him as the bureau chief was waiting. On the way, Wen Ming explained that the Min Dao Bureau was responsible for handling cases that ordinary people couldn't solve, such as their recent incident at the lake. Wen Ming then took them to a villa on the mountain. Upon entering, he immediately led them to the bureau chief's room. The fat guy thought the bureau chief must be impressive to have his own chef, but Wen Ming corrected him, explaining that this was Gao Liang, their bureau chief. The chief invited both of them to eat and informed them that they would become investigation officers of the Min Dao Bureau. Wen Ming wanted the chief to assign them to his Department 1, as Department 2 had always taken the good staff, but the chief questioned why he was rushing when they hadn't even signed contracts yet. The fat guy refused, saying he had no talent for this work, and Lazai felt he was better suited for military service. The chief didn't want to force them, saying the job needed mutual agreement, but they couldn't return to their original units as they had already signed military transfer papers. Although they hadn't personally signed these papers, the fat guy told Lazai that the chief had blocked their retreat from the beginning. With no other options except becoming police officers or security guards, they might as well take this job. When the fat guy asked about the job's difficulty, the chief mentioned that while challenging, the benefits were 10 times better than their previous jobs. Hearing this, both accepted. Wen Ming then led them to his department. According to the contract, this would be a lifetime job with no end date. He then took them below the villa to a massive base and their workplace. Upon entering, they met Pu Jun, who was fixing a toilet and known for breaking things in the room. When Wen Ming asked about the others, he learned they had all been borrowed by Department 2. Wen Ming was angry that the other department head had taken his people without permission. Shortly after, Bai Lu came to tell Wen Ming to get the new staff their equipment before closing time. She led them to meet her department head, Mr. Wu, who gave them each a bracelet. These bracelets served as access passes to the bureau, communication devices, and locators. More importantly, they could sense the wearer's life status, allowing the bureau to know if they were in trouble. Bai Lu then brought equipment for both of them, which included a gun and a baton. They would have a 3-month probation period before taking the assessment to become official employees. She would be the supervisor for both of them. Meanwhile, the bureau chief had met with Wu Mian again. He had kept Lazai for him. When Wu Mian asked why he also kept the fat guy, the chief said he had his own eye for talent. He mentioned that Lazai had absorbed the old wizard's power, so there might be issues in the future, but Wu Mian was confident he could handle any problems that might arise. Wu Mian brought back images of 2 totems he found for the bureau chief. These totems were quite similar and belonged to 2 kingdoms that had disappeared in a desert. At this time, Bai Lu had taken the fat guy and Lazai to the library and asked them to read as many books as possible because there would be a test. The fat guy wanted Lazai to read for him and let him copy during the test, but Lazai hadn't even finished school before joining the army, so he might not understand any of it. Bai Lu advised both to read extensively as it would help them adapt faster to their work here. There were a total of 6 investigation departments here. Their Department 1 was for general investigation and used to be the largest until a traitor appeared and caused Department 1's authority to decline. Now Department 2 was the core of the Bureau. Only department heads were allowed to know about the traitor incident. Department 3 worked overseas year-round, so they were rarely at the Bureau. Department 4 specialized in survey work. Her Department 5 was responsible for gathering information and providing equipment. Department 6 handled tasks that Department 5 couldn't do, but she specifically warned them not to offend the head of Department 6. She then led them inside, where they saw a group of people passing by. This group was from Department 2, and the person in the middle was Department 2 head named Qiu Bulao. Director Qiu and Wen Ming wondered why the other party was here. Bai Lu explained that for this case, the bureau chief wanted Departments 1 and 2 to work together, but both department heads disliked working with each other. Director Qiu thought it was normal for him to arbitrarily borrow people from Wen Ming since Department 1 hadn't solved many cases in the past year. With the previous betrayal incident, Department 1 had lost even more influence. Director Qiu also advised Wen Ming to resign soon. Department 2 was now rising to the top of the Bureau due to their higher case-solving rate, and people were saying that if the Bureau chief retired, Director Qiu would take over. The fat guy wanted to skip this case, but Wen Ming made him go to avoid rumors that he couldn't control his staff as a boss. When departing, the Bureau chief informed that their mission this time was to investigate an ancient ruin under the desert. Previous investigation showed this ruin was related to a legendary ancient country. A 5-person archaeological team had entered the ruin but never returned. A rescue team had also gone in but hadn't come out yet, so their Mindao Bureau was deployed to handle it. Since their priority mission was to rescue the people trapped under the ruin, they needed to act quickly before those below ran out of supplies. Wen Ming warned Director Qiu beforehand not to think about ordering his people around. Lazai and the fat guy asked Pujun about why the 2 department heads hated each other, but he was too afraid of heights to answer. Shortly after, they arrived at the location. After landing, Director Qiu had people line up neatly to move. When meeting the person in charge there, Director Qiu requested them to keep people away to avoid interference. Wen Ming, true to his name, went forward to shake hands and greet. Wu Mian was also nearby observing the situation. After examining the information left by the archaeological team, they had a general understanding of the ruined structure. Director Qiu then wanted Bai Lu to control people up here and not let anyone go down to interfere with him. If by tomorrow morning he hadn't led people back, Wen Ming would command the remaining people. Wen Ming then also called Bai Lu to arrange signal coverage so Director Qiu wouldn't be buried down there. That night, the fat guy wondered to Lazai why there was still no news from Department 2's people. Lazai believed that the department head wasn't someone without capability, so a coward like him shouldn't worry too much. The fat guy mentioned that they had both been through life and death situations before. However, he wondered if they would really have to live like this from now on. But thinking too much was pointless, so both went to sleep early. At midnight, Lazai suddenly saw a herd of goats passing by nearby. He followed one goat, and the fat guy, discovering Lazai's midnight departure, grabbed his coat and followed. Bai Lu also noticed both leaving their tents. The fat guy caught up to Lazai and asked what he was doing out here at midnight. When Lazai mentioned the goat, the fat guy didn't believe him since there shouldn't be goats in the desert. Lazai then couldn't see the goat anymore and thought maybe he was seeing things. As they were about to leave, they suddenly fell through quicksand. Lazai tried to grab protruding rocks, but they crumbled, causing him to fall below. Lazai luckily dodged a falling rock and discovered a goat skeleton nearby. He then ran to the fat guy to wake him up. When calling didn't work, Lazai slapped him hard to wake him. The fat guy asked if Lazai could climb up, but Lazai was helpless as the place was too weathered and the rocks were too loose to bear weight. The fat guy tried to call for help, but there was no signal, so they had to give up. Lazai suddenly saw a creature standing on the fat guy's head and pointed his gun at it, asking him to stay still. The fat guy couldn't see this creature, so asked Lazai not to shoot, but the creature lunged forward, climbed onto Lazai, and bit his hand. It then took the gun and pointed it at both of them. Lazai signaled and hid with the fat guy behind a rock, but the creature didn't know how to use the gun. Suddenly, a stick flew down, causing it to drop the gun. The gun fired a few shots while the creature escaped through a nearby small tunnel. Bai Lu then appeared and said she had been assigned to watch over them. She wanted to see where this small tunnel led, so she crawled in to check. While crawling, Bai Lu realized the stone pillars here weren't normal. She recognized them as dowry that a king had offered to this country, but the king of this country worshipped an evil religion and caused a taboo that led to divine punishment, burying the entire country in sand. This must be the location of that country. Bai Lu then created a 3D model to observe, but the fat guy wanted them to find a way out first. Lazai wanted him not to rush, as Wen Ming would surely send people to find them. Suddenly Bai Lu discovered something and told the fat guy not to touch anything, but he had already activated a button on a pillar. The ceiling began to shake and was about to collapse, forcing Lazai to rush and push both of them away. The next morning, when Wen Ming came to the tent looking for Lazai, both were gone. Bai Lu was also missing, so Wen Ming had to have people investigate the surroundings. Meanwhile, Lazai's group was still safe under the ruins, but Bai Lu didn't understand why the bureau chief let both participate in this case when neither had reached the level of a regular investigator. She called them troublemakers with a very annoyed attitude. However, Lazai then realized if they stayed here waiting, they would run out of oxygen to breathe, so he asked the fat guy to help move these stone pillars. Although he was still afraid of meddling again, they would die if they didn't act, so both pushed a stone pillar away, revealing a pole cord underneath. Lazai took a risk and pulled it, opening a passage in the floor. Lazai then noticed this place was about to collapse, so he told both to jump down first while he held the cord to keep the door open. He waited for both to go first before jumping down the slide himself. Lazai saw the creature from last night, but it disappeared when they exited the slide. The three then followed a path that led straight to what appeared to be the king's tomb. After looking around, Bai Lu asked Lazai and the fat guy to pry open that coffin. They tried but couldn't, so Bai Lu came to check and saw this coffin was made of bronze. People of that time believed that if buried in a bronze coffin, the soul couldn't transcend, so it seemed this king was framed by someone and trapped here. She then suggested they needed specialized tools to open the coffin, but Lazai took out his knife wanting to try prying it open with it. Bai Lu wasn't very confident but still let him try, and Lazai actually managed to pry the coffin lid open. They discovered inside was a wrapped corpse, and when Bai Lu looked at it, she realized this wasn't the king because the facial features didn't match those of people from this buried country. The fat guy then fumbled around in the coffin and suddenly fell straight down through a hole. When both asked him about it, he said it was quite dark down there and there were some paintings. Bai Lu also decided to go down to check, while that creature continued observing the group's movements. Wen Ming was very worried at this point, so he called Bai Lu's Section 5 chief to report that there was still no news from Director Qiu and Lazai's group of 3 had gone missing. Wu Mian, sitting nearby, overheard this, and when the Section 5 chief said he would report to the bureau chief, Wu Mian began to take action. Meanwhile, Lazai's group had actually reached the king's tomb. The paintings there told a story. The king of this country had a daughter whom he deeply cherished. The princess fell in love with a young man from a neighboring country, so the king reluctantly married her off. However, not long after, the princess died at the hands of her husband's family, who then led an army to attack her home country. The king had to use forbidden magic to create a black tornado and perish together with his enemies. So it seemed this coffin belonged to the king, while the coffin above was for the person who killed the princess. The king, hating that person, buried them in a bronze coffin. They then noticed that the king in the paintings always had a blue face, except in the painting where he was holding a lamp and bowing, where there was no blue color. The king's blue color must have been caused by the evil religion he believed in. Suddenly, they discovered a lamp appearing on the king's coffin that wasn't there before, and in the recent painting, the lamp in the king's hand had disappeared. As Lazai was about to act, he suddenly fainted. He then discovered the lamp releasing blue smoke, and that smoke suddenly transformed into the king. He wanted revenge for his daughter. Lazai and the fat guy fired their guns, but it had no effect, so Bai Lu rushed forward and used his baton to strike him away. Just when they thought it was over, the king suddenly stabbed Bai Lu. The king then slashed at the fat guy's neck and continued fighting with Lazai. Lazai held his knife and dodged the king's attacks to circle behind and attack him, but all his strikes were useless. Meanwhile, Bai Lu and the fat guy were safe. Wu Mayan had found them and informed them that Lazai was experiencing high-level hallucinations. He had been unconscious for nearly an hour, and Bai Lu then told the fat guy that Wu Mayan was actually Section 6 chief. He informed them that although Lazai was experiencing hallucinations, all injuries received were real. Wu Mayan then decided to enter the hallucination himself to help Lazai. He walked into the hallucination and appeared before Lazai, throwing the king aside and telling Lazai to quickly extinguish the candle. When the king flew around to attack Wu Mayan, he was caught by him. Lazai then knocked away the lamp and woke up. Lazai later met with the fat guy and learned about Chief Wu. The chief criticized Lazai's poor skills, while Lazai remembered a way they could escape from there. Meanwhile, Pu Jun had informed the bureau chief that Wen Ming had also gone down to the relic, and they had temporarily obtained a map of the underground relic from signals that Bai Lu had fortunately sent back. The bureau chief ordered Pu Jun to have people cordon off the area based on the map and begin excavation. Shortly after, someone came to inform Pu Jun about receiving signals that might be from Wen Ming, and the signal location was in the central area. Lazai then told the group about the hidden passage he saw when the king turned to smoke and escaped. They later opened a hidden door, but inside was another formation. Bai Lu suspected that the earlier hallucination deliberately revealed information to Lazai to lure everyone into this second formation. Wu Mayan revealed this was the 9 deaths 1 life formation, where among all paths only one led to survival while the other 9 led to death, and looking at it there seemed to be no pattern. So perhaps even the person who set up the formation didn't know which was the correct path. Wu Mayan said they had no way to solve the formation, so he told the fat guy to just choose a path randomly. The fat guy hesitated to choose, so Wu Mayan still insisted he pick one, so he chose the middle path to go. As they walked a distance, the path behind them started crumbling. The fat guy got scared and said if they died, don't blame him but blame Wu Mayan for making him choose that path. But the path they were on remained safe and nothing happened. After a while, their path suddenly crumbled as well, causing them all to fall down. However, they ended up falling into a forest and everyone was safe. Wu Mayan was also amazed that someone could create a 3-layer hallucination like this. They then discovered Director Q and Wen Ming were underwater, so they swam down to rescue them. But when they pulled them up, the fat guy got tangled in some algae underwater and was pulled back down. Lazai swam down to cut the algae and rescue the fat guy. When they got back to shore, they were able to revive Wen Ming. The fat guy asked how the two ended up there, and Wen Ming said he went to look for the 3 of them, and unexpectedly came across Director Q in the water. So he went to save him but got tangled in the algae and pulled down. Suddenly, Director Q woke up and came at Wen Ming with a sword. The fat guy thought Director Q wanted to settle the score with Wen Ming there, so Lazai went to block his attack but was knocked back. He suspected Director Q was affected by the hallucination. The two then had to restrain Director Q, while Wu Mayan just threw something into the water. The water then burst into intense flames, and he said the water was the agent causing the hallucination here. Director Q snapped out of it. Wu Mayan said the lamp in the tomb came from this water. Suddenly, the creature that had attacked Lazai appeared in the tree branches. The group shot at it, but it moved too fast, so Wu Mayan threw fire to knock it away. He then let it come at him and unleashed a dragon fire to defeat it. The group then escaped the hallucination. The fat guy thought Wu Mayan should have intervened earlier, but Wu Mayan said if they let the fat guy do everything, what would they do with their salaries? They later found the missing people, and it seemed they were in a death-feigned state from having their Kai channels blocked. Pu Jun had also dug a way down, so they took the injured people out first. The fat guy noticed some valuables and wanted to take a few, and he found a necklace and asked if it was Lazai's, but Lazai just thought it was someone else's, so he would return it. Wu Mayan recognized the symbol on the necklace as familiar. The team then headed back after completing the rescue mission. The fat guy accidentally discovered some jade stones in his clothes. When Ming decided to divide them evenly, and Wu Mayan also took one, telling Lazai to come see him at a certain address after this case and not tell anyone else. Bai Lu then came in and demanded to know what they were hiding and forced them to hand it over. Not long after, back at the office, when Ming invited the fat guy and Lazai for drinks after completing the mission, as they had made significant contributions to help boost the reputation of Section 1. The Section 5 chief also came to drink with them, saying they should drink by the bottle, not cups. When Ming quickly downed a whole bottle and started getting drunk, saying the two new employees were the real stars, so he gave a bottle to the fat guy, who also drank it all and passed out from low alcohol tolerance. Lazai tried to leave but was held back and forced to drink. The next morning, Lazai realized he had training, so he woke up the fat guy, but found him unexpectedly turned blue. Lazai had to take him to the medical department, but on the way they ran into Bai Lu. She examined the situation and took the fat guy to her section chief, who said it was likely from drinking the water in the tomb, and they just need to do an MRI to remove the discoloration. While they were there, the chief also checked Lazai, but told him there was nothing wrong and let him go. A spy of Director Q's had reported Lazai's condition to the chief, making him wonder how Gao Yang could let this thing be in the organization. At this time, the fat guy has returned to normal. Now he doubts that Lazai has an acquaintance with Wu Mayan because Lazai has encountered accidents twice and Wu Mayan has come to rescue him. Not to mention that the old Taoist priest said earlier that Lazai's knife also belonged to Wu Mayan. Lazai did not believe it much, but suddenly both of them were arrested by Director Q's people. During this time, the head of Department 5 had gone to meet the director and Wu Mayan to report the research results and warn that Lazai would soon be eroded by the old Taoist priest's dark magic. Bai Lu suddenly came to report that Director Qiu had captured Lazai and the fat guy and was now fighting with Wen Ming. Wen Ming came to demand the release of the people, but Director Qiu believed that Lazai had the potential to become a rebel like the one Wen Ming had recruited before. However, the director personally came here and asked Director Qiu to release the people, as he knew well what was inside Lazai, so he had the head of Department 5 closely monitor Lazai's condition. But Director Qiu still believed that they had not seen the coffin and shed tears, so the situation would happen again as before. However, the director dared to ensure that if anything happened, he would take responsibility himself. But Director Qiu had a condition that he would be the supervisor for the entry test into the organization in 2 months. Bai Lu decided that from now on, she must train both of them carefully, if they do not want to be under Director Qiu's sword. In the morning, they started by jogging, then training chemical synthesis, then gun shooting, wrestling, martial arts, and many other things. They had to train from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, and then they could rest. A month passed, and one day Bai Lu took both of them to go shopping. She noticed that the fat guy was best to lose weight, because he had been training hard for a whole month, but still didn't lose any fat. As for Lazai, he was carrying a bunch of things that Bai Lu bought. She then reminded both of them to try their best for the exam next month, because Director Qiu would certainly not let them be at ease. If they failed, they would have to leave here. But if Lazai left the organization, the thing inside him would erode him to death, so he was forced to try his best to stay in the organization. A month later, the exam was held. Director Qiu said that their mission was to capture a person who was said to have eaten the poultry of the village in recent times, and he was currently hiding in this house. They had 30 minutes to bring the person back alive. It sounded easy, but they still needed to be careful. After the two of them entered the house, they smelled a pungent stench. After checking the house and finding no one, they heard a sound behind the house, so they ran out to see the target eating raw chicken. Lazai realized he was possessed, so he quickly ran away. The two chased after him, and he kicked the roof tile down to make the fat guy fall behind and find another way to go. Lazai kept chasing and threw a stick to make him fall, but he pushed Lazai back and ran away. But Lazai still caught his leg, and when he tried to run, the fat guy jumped down from the roof and pinned him down. The mission was completed, and the fat guy was taken away, but Lazai was called to stay behind to clean up. Thinking it was just cleaning up the scene, but Director Qiu said that Lazai was the one who needed to be cleaned up. The reason he brought him here was to easily hide the body. But Wenming and Bai Lu came to rescue Lazai, and the director also received a message from the director requiring him to release the person. A few days later, Lazai's group set out for a city to carry out a mission. As soon as they landed in the city, the whole group met a policeman named Yang Xiao, who helped them with the transportation work. As for Director Qiu and Wenming, they were now allowed to go on a trip to erase their grudges. The two were exiled to an island for a week as punishment, and Bai Lu also gave Lazai a drug to suppress the thing inside him. The fat guy also asked Yang Xiao about the mission they needed to do now. They needed to investigate the mysterious phenomenon of people suddenly falling into a vegetative state while walking on the street and being sent to the hospital. Initially, they thought this was just a simple case, but then similar incidents kept occurring every few days, so they had to pay attention to this case. Lazai suddenly felt hot in his body, so they suspected it was a side effect of the medicine and took him to the hospital for examination. When they arrived, Yang Xiao informed them that unconscious patients were all taken to the hospital basement to avoid excessive media attention. There, both of them met Director Lam, who was from room 4 and had arrived before them but also encountered troubles, so all three were needed for support. According to Director Lam, all victims had the same mark on their bodies. Yang Xiao would later arrange accommodation for Lazai's group so they could begin investigation in the following days. That night, while Lazai was discussing with Fat Guy about whether this medicine really worked, Lazai received news that Director Lam had an incident. They later rushed to the hospital and met Bai Lu, who informed them that Director Lam was found unconscious on a chair and was hospitalized. They met Yang Xiao, who was bringing food to his wife. According to the nurse, Yang Xiao's wife had an accident a year ago. Their child died and his wife was paralyzed from the waist down. His wife had attempted suicide multiple times but was prevented by Yang Xiao, only to remain in a coma all this time. Yang Xiao had also incurred a large debt from caring for his wife. Lazai's group then went to Director Lam's place and encountered Wu Mayan, who was already there. He informed them that Director Lam had been possessed by an energy force similar to the one inside Lazai, but he had easily removed it and asked them to find something to contain this energy. Fat Guy found a water pot and asked Wu Mayan if he could extract the thing inside Lazai, but he couldn't handle this case. That night, Lazai woke up suddenly from a nightmare. Wu Mayan had extracted his consciousness to create an avatar so his body could rest while his mind could still work. He took Lazai into Fat Guy's consciousness to see. When they entered, it was a magnificent scenic spot, but going deeper, he discovered Fat Guy winning against all versions of himself in different types of chess games. Wu Mayan brought Lazai out and separated Fat Guy's consciousness too. He admitted the bureau chief was right, that Fat Guy wasn't ordinary. Wu Mayan asked Fat Guy to release that energy force, which Wu Mayan then grabbed and squeezed. It split into two and flew in different directions. Wu Mayan wanted both of them to search one path while he would handle the other. They later chased the black shadow to the hospital's equipment room. It hid inside, so Lazai went in while Fat Guy guarded the door. Suddenly the door closed and the shadow attacked Lazai. Fat Guy pushed the door open and came in. Then Lazai told him to call Wu Mayan using the red string Wu Mayan had given them. However, the shadow knocked the string into a water tank, forcing Fat Guy to run to retrieve it, while Lazai was controlled by the shadow. It wanted to take the old wizard's power inside Lazai. Since he was trying to escape from it anyway, he might as well let it have it. But Wu Mayan then arrived and began dealing with this shadow. He knocked the shadow away only to realize it was just a puppet. Fat Guy was startled because Lazai had died, but since this was just an avatar, there was no need to worry. Lazai in bed later woke up and knew that the shadow was just a puppet, so the controller must be nearby. Meanwhile, on a rooftop, several suspicious figures appeared and called the puppet controller Master, and this Master turned out to be none other than Yang Zio. During this time, Lazai reviewed the marks on the victims' bodies and found them familiar. Suddenly, they discovered insects crawling out from the marks. These were poisonous insects, and if they carelessly removed them, they would die and release toxins into the victims' bodies. What Lazai wanted to say was that this mark was similar to the symbol on a ring that Wu Mayan had taken from the tomb last time. Meanwhile, the people who came to find Yang Zio were there to request his return to them, as he had been wandering for too long, but Yang Zio needed more time. These three believed Yang Zio was still attached to his dying wife, but he believed there was still a way to bring her back. The leader, Lu Yun, said he would let Yang Zio do as he pleased, but first needed to hand over the location of this city's sacred artifact. However, he didn't know where the sacred artifact was because this city had changed greatly over the past 100 years. But Lu Yun claimed he wasn't easily fooled and would try to find it to show Yang Zio. Yang Zio then went to find Laxai's group. Bai Lu had given him the investigation files, so he asked Lazai to come to the station with him to handle some procedures. As soon as they left the hospital, Lu Yun pursued them by car from behind. Meanwhile, Bai Lu and Fat Guy decided to sneak into Yang Zio's wife's room to see if she could be treated with the Bureau's technology. However, Fat Guy then discovered some green jade pieces under the bed. These were the ones he had picked up from the buried kingdom. Yang Zio must have been there, and since Lazai saw the symbol on the victims' bodies matching the one on the necklace from that kingdom, everything must be connected. Bai Lu then called the director to inquire, and he cross-referenced information to discover Yang Zio was the leader of an evil cult. However, they couldn't make any sudden moves for now. Yet, when hearing that Lazai had gone with Yang Zio, the director became worried because the bureau chief had already handled all the procedures, so there was no need for anything else. Fat Guy then called Lazai, who heard the news but didn't rush to act, only asking Yang Zio to take him back to the hospital. But Yang Zio knew the truth and told Lazai to stop pretending. He then threw Lazai out and revealed he was one of the group Lazai had rescued from the tomb before. Lazai asked what he needed the old wizard's resentful energy for, and Yang Zio revealed he needed it to save his wife, though he would only know if it worked by trying. Lazai was then knocked down and was about to have his negative energy extracted when Wu Mayan texted Lazai to steal a car and escape. He was later blocked by Yang Zio, so he drove into a cliff wall to cause rocks to fall and crush Yang Zio while he escaped. He called Fat Guy and reported the location Wu Mayan had sent him, which coincidentally was where Director Lam said he had been attacked, so both sides decided to meet at that location. Fat Guy's group took a taxi to the meeting point, but the driver advised them against going there as it was an unlucky place. 20 years ago, a construction accident had killed 3 workers there, And after the building was completed, accidents kept happening to residents, so it had been abandoned for many years. Lazai had arrived and was about to enter when he suddenly heard someone following, so he drew his gun, but it was Fat Guy and Bai Lu both had been kicked out by the taxi driver upon arrival. Meanwhile, Yang Zio had escaped from the rubble and met Lu Yun again, who said he had found the sacred artifact's location and would no longer bother Yang Zio. But upon leaving, he sent people to the hospital. Lazai's group had entered the unlucky high-rise. As soon as Lazai stepped into the elevator, he saw crying visions of people who had died from elevator falls. The group then went upstairs to investigate. While climbing the stairs, Bai Lu suddenly heard something, so the group went up together. Upon rushing up, the entire floor was empty, but suddenly crazed figures emerged from the darkness. Not knowing if they were human or ghost, they had to run. But running upstairs, they were blocked by others. They soon surrounded all three, so Bai Lu attacked first. When they realized these were puppets, Fat Guy and Lazai drew their guns and shot. But as soon as they dealt with them, they returned to normal. Suddenly Wu Mayan flew up and used magic to eliminate all the puppets. He told them to go to the basement, not upstairs. Once in the basement, there was a jade piece, and Wu Mayan asked all three to help him clean around it. At this time, Yang Zio was very angry because Lu Yun had used his wife as a hostage to force him to take the sacred object from Wu Mayan, and everyone knew about Wu Mayan's power. Yang Zio then returned home for a visit to reminisce about memories with his wife. Lu Yun later called to announce that if he didn't have the sacred object by tomorrow evening, Yang Zio would never see his wife again. The next morning, Lazai's group went to Yang Zio's wife's hospital room, but they were one step too late. Wu Mayan had given the bag to Lazai and informed them that the sacred object was inside, and Yang Zio had learned about this, so he waited outside the hospital to follow Lazai. After Bai Lu left first, Yang Zio immediately approached and rammed into Lazai to steal the bag. Yang Zio managed to escape and even shook off Lazai, but he was caught by Wu Mayan. Yang Zio believed this thing originally belonged to him, so he was just taking it back. But Wu Mayan also wanted to reclaim what belonged to him. Yang Zio knew he was referring to the half-pill that the old sorcerer had stolen from Wu Mayan. Yang Zio didn't keep that half the old man had just used Yang Zio as a shield. When Yang Zio wanted to leave, he was blocked by Lazai and the Fat Guy, but Yang Zio still maintained that the case of people continuously falling into comas in this city had nothing to do with him. He then injected a needle into his arm to draw blood and teleported away. Wu Mayan let Yang Zio go because that spell cost half of one's vital energy. It seemed Yang Zio wasn't the mastermind in this case, there was someone else. Yang Zio then went to Lu Yun's place to demand his wife back. But Lu Yun wanted Yang Zio to hand over the item first. If he wouldn't hand it over, neither would Lu Yun, because he knew Yang Zio was the one under time pressure. After Yang Zio handed over the sacred object, Lu Yun betrayed him and ordered his men to deal with Yang Zio. He tried to resist, but trading half his vital energy to escape earlier had come at a great cost. Yang Zio went to his wife's location, but Lu Yun approached and struck him with a blow, revealing that his wife had died when he brought her there. While Yang Zio was devastated by his wife's death, Lu Yun further revealed that his wife's accident was also his doing, which enraged Yang Zio to fight back. He claimed that a sect leader like Yang Zio abandoned his sect for a woman, so he had to eliminate what made Yang Zio weak. Yang Zio was pinned to the ground and was about to join his wife in the other world when Lazai's group and Wu Mayan arrived. Wu Mayan wanted both staff members to handle Lu Yun's subordinates while he checked on Yang Zio's wife's condition. Yang Zio wanted Wu Mayan to stay away from his wife, but Wu Mayan suggested Yang Zio should worry about himself first. Wu Mayan then took out Yang Zio's wife's soul and let her flow along the river. Yang Zio admitted he had made a mistake in accepting Lu Yun into the sect, but Lu Yun claimed Yang Zio's mistake was leaving the sect to follow a woman. Both had been seriously wounded by each other, so Yang Xiao threw needles to make the iron container on the ceiling fall. When on the ground, Yang Xiao was about to finish off Lu Yun, but La Sai's group stopped him because if Lu Yun died, the people in the hospital would die too. Yang Xiao didn't care, but Lu Yun still gloated that if there were people paving his way, his death would be worth it. Bai Lu called to report that people in the hospital had started to act like zombies, so Wu Mayan told them both to return while he would handle things here. Lexai's group returned to Bai Lu to prevent the people inside from escaping the hospital. Meanwhile, Wu Mayan gave Lu Yun a beating and then put a centipede in his mouth. Saying he didn't like conditions and wasn't patient, either Lu Yun would remove the poison worms or he would make him suffer worse than death. While La Sai's group was struggling with the patients, suddenly the poison worms were removed, but Bai Lu still wanted them to capture and deal with all the poison worms before they escaped outside. Although the poison worms were eliminated, Wu Mayan didn't immediately let Lu Yun go, but would take him back to the Bureau for investigation. He then asked Yang Xiao what he planned to do now since he still had a way to help Yang Xiao meet his wife again. But before he could ask, Wu Mayan knocked him unconscious. When he woke up, Yang Xiao was in the hospital and received a letter that Wu Mayan had left for him. After reading it, Yang Xiao was shocked and then heard a child's voice. This child was the reincarnation of Yang Xiao's wife, so now he could start over with her, but it would be after almost 20 years. The next day, La Sai's group returned to headquarters, and the fat guy asked Bai Lu about whether they get vacation time from work. She explained that after each mission, they are given a certain number of days off based on the difficulty level of the completed mission. The highest is Z-level missions, after which they can take as many days off as they want. They had completed 2 B-level missions, so they would get 6 days off. They then surprisingly heard news that a new employee had been recruited to Wu Mayan's room 6. The fat guy was surprised because Wu Mayan had never recruited anyone before. He went to check and was shocked to find that the employee was Yang Xiao. He would now be their colleague, and La Zai pulled the fat guy away, saying they couldn't understand Wu Mayan's wishes. Meanwhile, at a mountain temple, monks were hurriedly preparing the temple for a wedding. The abbot believed that if foreign priests could do this, Buddhist monks certainly could too. The abbot demanded his disciples fix everything according to his wishes. Suddenly, a disciple burst into flames after touching a broken incense stick, so he quickly threw him into a water vat to extinguish the fire. He then discovered someone outside the temple gates. He recognized this person, so that night, he called the bureau chief to report that someone they thought was dead was actually still alive. The next morning, La Zai went to visit his old comrade's grave and met Captain Wang there. He wanted La Zai to never forget his duties as a soldier. Right after Captain Wang left, Bai Lu suddenly came to find La Zai and asked him to stop his vacation for an urgent mission. The fat guy was now driving Yang Xiao to do the mission together. They both picked up La Zai and Bai Lu and together went to the mountain temple. La Zai saw the temple had become a wedding venue and knew the old abbot was up to something. He not only knew this place, but had lived there since childhood. Bai Lu then knocked on the door to call someone to open it, and this person accidentally recognized that La Zai had returned. Meanwhile, the person the bureau chief was worried about was now at the base and began investigating La Zai's group. He knew the whole group had gone to the temple and knew the bureau chief had indeed acted very quickly. He then went to the experimental samples he created to activate them. He wanted to see how Gao Liang would continue being bureau chief when each staff member was lost. He had waited a long time for this moment and was determined to carry it out. The monk then told La Zai that the abbot regretted losing a talent like him. La Zai thought he regretted not torturing him for a few more days. They then met the abbot, who was very happy that La Zai had returned. He had been intentionally strict years ago, hoping La Zai would one day join the Min Dao Bureau to work. But now La Zai didn't want to accept him as his teacher, making him feel La Zai was still the same as before. He then invited the others to stay overnight. But the bureau chief said they were here to take the abbot away because it wasn't safe here anymore. However, the abbot felt he didn't want to trouble the Mindao Bureau, so he would still choose to stay. Meanwhile, Mindao Bureau staff were suddenly attacked by a group of monsters. Room 5's head discovered staff were dying one by one and reported to the bureau chief, asking him to come quickly. The bureau chief discovered their system had been hacked, exposing all staff. Director Q called, but he ignored it and issued a warning requiring all staff to discard their identity bracelets. Lasai's group had just discarded their bracelets when they discovered the mountain temple was under attack, so Lasai wanted to go back to check, but they were attacked by a monster charging from the front. The fat guy reversed the car to avoid the attack, but after backing up for a while, another monster appeared behind them, so he steered to turn the car around and charged forward. The group was then chased by a horde of monsters. They kept pouring down from the mountain and even broke rocks to block the group's path. Even though Lazai had drawn his gun to shoot back, they were still too numerous, forcing him to give up. Suddenly, a monster jumped down from the mountain and crushed the engine at the front of the car, leaving the group now surrounded. The red eye in front appeared to be the leader of this pack. It then let its minions charge forward to attack Lazai's group. The group was forced to exit the car to fight while the red-eyed creature jumped straight up the mountain. While Lazai's group was struggling to deal with the monsters, Yang Zio was distressed because the phone containing his wife's photos was damaged. He then summoned a needle and controlled it to eliminate all the surrounding minions. Afterward, he destroyed the car and created dozens of other needles to launch everywhere to clear out the monsters. Yang Zio originally didn't want to help, but now it had become a personal vendetta, so he took action. He wanted the group to quickly head up the mountain to deal with the red-eyed creature, while he would handle these monsters. Bai Lu believed Yang Zio would be fine, so he told La Zai to quickly get moving. On their way, the group noticed that the city was also under attack. The bureau chief called Wen Ming, Director Qiu, and Department Head Lin to help mobilize their subordinates to rescue people in the city. Department Head No. 5 thought that the traitor could be among them, and the enemy must want the bureau chief to divide his staff to make them easier to deal with. But if he didn't help save people now, then who would? Director Qiu and Wen Ming both wanted each other to be careful and not die so they could still have someone to argue with later. It could be said that although they openly despise each other in dangerous moments, both were very concerned for their rival. Meanwhile, Lasai's group had returned to the temple and split up to search for the abbot. They later discovered the monk Lasai knew was unconscious over there, but couldn't get close due to the debris. Bai Lu had found the abbot, who was being attacked and thrown away by that monster. Lazai had quickly rushed over to stop the monster and asked the fat guy and Bai Lu to take the abbot to safety. Once stable, the fat guy immediately returned to support Lazai. The abbot also wanted Bai Lu to help the other two because he had once abandoned his teammates for the mission, which led to the current situation. The monster then charged at the fat guy, forcing Lazai to step in to block the attack and push it back. He knocked off its glasses, causing it to lose direction and get caught in a headlock by Bai Lu. The fat guy shot it so Bai Lu could get away and help Lazai rush in to behead it. But when they went outside, they discovered the abbot had disappeared. He had been captured by the mastermind up there, who also released a pack of monsters to attack them. Bai Lu recognized that person as Sanda, who used to be a colleague of the bureau chief and the abbot, but he was supposed to have died long ago. He believed that he had been betrayed by the bureau chief and the abbot back then but fortunately didn't die. So now he had the chance to return for revenge. The abbot advised Sanda to let go of his hatred, but he had come this far and couldn't just give up. He felt that he had been abandoned by both of them that year, only to become a creature that he himself despised. The pain of being burned had followed him for these 30 years. Sanda then noticed Lazai and revealed a secret to him, that he would die sooner or later. But what's more frightening is that he wouldn't die, but would become something neither human nor ghost like himself. The reason Gao Liang kept him and let him join the Mindao Bureau was because he was a dangerous element that needed to be eliminated. He kept him to exploit his labor so that if he died, there would be no loss. But trust him, that one day the Mindao Bureau would turn against him just as they're turning against him now. So he might as well follow him, and he would teach him how to use the power within him. As Lazai began to hesitate, the abbot rushed to grab Sanda, but he knocked the abbot down and started creating a fire bridge surrounding Lazai's group to gradually drain their oxygen. He knew the abbot wasn't afraid of death but feared involving others, so now he just needed the abbot to reveal where the map he needed was, because it wasn't by chance that the abbot built the temple right on the mountain where the map was found. He could wait for the abbot to speak up, but he feared Lazai's group couldn't. The abbot finally compromised, so Sanda spared Lazai's group. He led Sanda to the Buddha statue, and the abbot had to use his face to unlock and reveal a tunnel beneath the temple. Sanda promised that after finishing his business, he would send Gao Liang down with the abbot. Lazai then tried to follow despite the abbot's attempts to stop him. Meanwhile, Mindao Bureau's people had started fighting back against the monster horde, but Department Head Lin unexpectedly discovered Director Qiu in a small alley with a blood-stained sword. Back at the temple, as Bai Lu tried to run to help the abbot, Yang Zhao arrived. He asked where Lazai was and was told he had gone down below, and that Lazai's condition might not last long. Lazai had now confronted Sanda, who revealed that the map was originally his but was stolen by Gao Liang. He was simply reclaiming what belonged to him. He also offered Lazai a chance to join his side and utilize the power within him, but Lazai refused to follow a murderous arsonist. Seeing that he was thoughtless, the old man decided to try stealing the power within him, but Yang Zhao arrived just in time to help. He noticed that Yang Zhao seemed to have also been brought to Mindao Bureau by Gao Liang, but Yang Zhao clarified that he joined voluntarily. Sanda didn't care and attacked Yang Zhao anyway. When Yang Zhao launched his needles, they were all burned up. Sanda landed a hit on Yang Zhao, but he used puppets to dodge. He then sent multiple clones to attack Sanda, who destroyed them all and even blocked Yang Zhao's sneak attack from behind. But seeing the fat guy running away with the map, he targeted him, forcing Yang Zhao to block the attack. Unexpectedly, Lazai rushed in only to be burned by Sanda, and the dark power of the old sorcerer within Lazai suddenly awakened. The old man suggested that he should accept this power rather than reject it. Lazai lost control and frantically attacked Sanda. Sanda asked Lazai how it felt to become a monster like him, but Lazai had lost his rationality to respond. Sanda could only focus on Lazai while continuously dodging and blocking his attacks. But Lazai used his knife to launch an attack that blew Sanda off the mountain and straight into the river. Lazai then turned to attack the fat guy. Yang Zhao stepped in to block but was thrown aside. Just as Lazai slashed at the map, he surprisingly unlocked some power that allowed him to regain his rationality and realize what he had done. The department heads were now overwhelmed by the numerous monsters showing no signs of decreasing. Unexpectedly, Wu Mayan created a formation covering the entire city and eliminated all the monsters. But Sanda suddenly rose from the lake with a giant body, emanating extreme heat. His flames burned everything nearby, but when the flames reached Wen Ming's group, Lazai rushed in to block the flames and charged forward. He swept past Wu Mayan and headed straight for Sanda. Lazai tried to get close to punch Sanda, but was knocked far away by his punch. Lazai then created many water tornadoes to submerge Sanda, but the abbot knew that wasn't enough. Sanda reached out to grab Lazai and told him his flames never extinguish, and he seemed intrigued by the power within him. He began absorbing the power from Lazai, which was exactly what Wu Mayan wanted. As soon as Sanda started absorbing, Wu Mayan rushed in to grab Sanda's head and pulled him out of that giant body. He revealed that he could have dealt with Sanda long ago, but deliberately waited to use him to extract all the evil Kai from Lazai. The old man still tried to attack Wu Mayan with that giant body, but Wu Mayan blocked it with just one hand and gave Sanda a bullet to the head. La Zai then fell into the water, and in his mind, Wu Mian told La Zai to choose one side of a coin and gave him a choice. Many days later, La Zai suddenly left Min Dao Bureau, while the bureau chief and the abbot wanted La Zai to walk his own path. They later decided to have a drink together after many years apart. As for La Zai, he now possessed new power, his hair had turned white, and both his eyes glowed. The film will continue in the future, so we'll wait to see how powerful La Zai's new abilities will be. For now, goodbye.